Here we can have a look at how to do some of the basics of Microsoft Excel. Excel is very useful as a tool for data analysis, for doing complicated calculations, or simply to do some mass, energy balances, or some flow sheeting. So when you open up a new workbook in Excel, you'll be greeted with a window that looks like this. Within this workbook, you can work on multiple worksheets at once, as you can see down the bottom here. This becomes very useful if you're flow sheeting an entire chemical plant or something similar that has a lot of data. You can then break these up into different sheets, and it's all sort of contained in one place, and it is a lot easier to work with and a lot easier to interpret the data if it's broken up into smaller sheets. So as you can see, each sheet is made up with a grid of different cells. All of the columns are labelled alphabetically across the top, and all the rows increase numerically as you go down. So, for example, the second column across the cell down would be referenced B3. This referencing system will become important later. So, in each of these cells is where we will be inputting any data or any text. So, if you're going to write in any text, so for example, if I was going to do a calculation to do with density, you type in density and the text will appear on the left-hand side. And then if I was going to put in a value next to this, for example, the approximate density of water, you see when we add in a number, it automatically formats the right-hand side of the cell. This becomes very useful in helping you to spot errors. For example, if I was to write 20s to O instead of to 0, you can see that to O is on the left, whereas the 20 gets positioned on the right-hand side of the cell. So this allows us to spot any mistakes and to find the data within our worksheet potentially a little bit easier. It's always a good idea to make sure that you include your units for each of them as well. So when I wanted to quote the density factor or the viscosity or whatever value I would like to record within my spreadsheet, it's best to write it out like this, because a lot of people are tempted to write it all in one cell, such as this. However, when we want to come reference a cell, we won't be able to reference that 1000 value as it's embedded in the text and as you can see on the left-hand side of the cell. However, with this, as we've just got the number in the cell, we will be able to reference this later. So if we're going to take the mass flow rate as an example, so our mass flow rate is equal to the density of our flow times the volumetric flow rate. So we've got our density already here, and then we can have our volumetric flow rate, and we're going to say that that is going to be 2 meters cubed per second. So if, for example, your labels here are larger than the cell, we can go across the top and change the width of the cell or the column to make it easier to look at. So mass flow rate here, if we were to do this calculation, is going to be the 1000 multiplied by the 2. So as you can see in this cell, we needed to start our formula with an equal sign, whereas because if I just did 1000 multiplied by 2 there, as we haven't started with the equal sign, Excel doesn't know that we want this to be a calculation. So it's important we always start with our equal sign to make sure that it does the calculation for us. And this introduces the basic mathematics symbols. So for addition, we want to just simply use the addition sign, subtraction, minus sign. Multiplication, we want to use an asterisk. Division, we want to use a slash. And then if we're going to do something to the power of, we're going to want to use the top hat like that. So if I wanted to say to do 2 multiplied by 3 and then square the result, it would look like that. And we'll get 36. Anyway, back to our example here. So we have our mass flow rate and we've calculated it. However, If I now found out that at the temperature that we're operating at, the density of our water was actually 998, this means that this mass flow rate is now wrong. If we go back to what it was, what we can do is we can reference the individual cells. So we start off our formula for our calculation as we normally would. Then we can click on or just type in the cell reference here. So this is C3 as it is in the C column, and it's the third row down. And then we can multiply this and do the same for the 2 value, so C4. So then when I click enter here, we're still getting the 2000. So you might think, oh, why is that important? Surely that's doing some extra work. Whereas now if I realise this is a different value to what we originally thought it was, I can change this to the 998, the new value, and then the mass flow rate will automatically update. This is incredibly helpful when you're working with large data sets where there are many values that depend on other things. You could have thousands of data points that rely on one starting value, such as a density. So therefore, if you need to change this density, or you've realized you've made an error anywhere, trying to follow this through and correct each individual data point becomes a very difficult task. Therefore, it is very important to reference our cells wherever we can. This is the main message of this video. Just remember to reference your cells wherever you can, because this will make your life a lot easier and make your spreadsheets a lot more usable if someone else has to use it. So this is the first video on the basics of Excel. So we've looked at how to do basic calculations, basic cell referencing, and how to get started in Excel.